Refusing to bulk and put on weight is the biggest mistake you can make in your fitness journey as a drug-free person. I made this mistake early on and I'm still paying the price to this day. Without the advice I'm going to give you in this video, it will take you 3 years to make the same progress that you could have made in 6 months. Stick around until the end of the video to learn how you can avoid this costly mistake and ultimately achieve your dream physique faster. I would bet my left nut that most of you are making this mistake whether you realize it or not. I started learning about the process of bulking and putting on muscle at a young age, but people I was following at the time promoted the idea that I could stay ripped to the bone and pack on tons of muscle mass. I was around 14 years old at the time and very gullible, so I bought into this concept. I didn't want to become fat. I had already struggled with being overweight throughout my entire childhood, and I had just lost all the excess body fat that I had, so this idea of staying shredded while packing on lots of muscle sounded very appealing. In the first 2 to 3 years of my training, I didn't make any progress in muscle and strength. I spun my wheels and became discouraged at the lack of progress that I was making. I was struggling to gain any strength in the gym and did not see any noticeable improvement in my physique. I've always had a huge appetite, which is what led me to being fat as a kid. I never struggled to gain weight, but before I started trying to gain muscle, I focused on losing fat. This period of time when I was on aggressive fat loss diets screwed up my perception of what it means to eat enough, and I was terrified of putting on body fat and undoing all the progress I'd made up until this point. I guarantee that newer lifters and younger guys are guilty of this without even realizing it. Like many skinny guys, I had a fucked up perception of what it meant to eat enough to gain muscle. A lot of times guys are also afraid of putting on a little bit of body fat and losing their abs. They think they're eating enough to gain muscle and strength, but if they track their calories for a few days, they would realize that they aren't eating more than 2,000 calories per day, which is nowhere near enough for any grown man to gain muscle and strength. Oftentimes, they're eating in a net calorie deficit by the end of the week. As I got a little bit older, I started to gain a little bit more confidence and I gave fewer fucks about staying really skinny. I had a period of time where I started eating to my heart's content and didn't restrict myself. This was when I started to pack on serious muscle and strength. My training was finally fun and my lifts started to increase in the gym. I broke through plateaus that I had been stuck at for ages and finally broke this vicious cycle that I was in. Eating more turned out to be essential for my progress. But after years of restriction, I took it a little bit too far and got a little bit fat. But I'm really grateful for this learning experience. It's what taught me that you can't serve 2 masters at once. So many guys self-sabotage by wanting to stay ripped when they bulk. But it does not work like this unless you're on drugs. You need to gain weight and a little bit of body fat in order to see significant growth in muscle and strength. I didn't allow myself to gain weight or any body fat up to this point, and it cost me so much progress. The moment I would eat more and start to see any body fat gain, I would immediately transition back into a cutting phase. And I wondered why I could never gain any muscle and strength. I felt my body wanting to eat more and grow, but I could not let it out of fear that I would gain weight and lose my abs. The funny part about this is that nobody looks good when they're skinny and have no muscle mass. When you consider that, the obsession with getting ripped from the beginning makes absolutely no sense. Looking back now, I'm mind blown at how convinced I was that I needed to keep getting leaner in order to look good, when it was fucking clear as day that I was super skinny and needed to focus on building a muscle base. I looked like a shrimp, but all I cared about was having some ab definition. But the ab definition does not mean anything if you don't have a muscle base to go along with it. You need to gain a little bit of body fat if you want to gain any appreciable amount of muscle and strength as a drug-free person. If you don't accept and embrace this, you will forever spin your wheels and go absolutely nowhere. When you're skinny or skinny fat, any fat that you have appears significant. This isn't because you're fat, but because you have no muscle underneath. When you're focused on building muscle and strength and you're doing things properly, any fat that you gain will appear negligible. I wish I had accepted that fact way before I did. This is not a universal truth, because if you're already fat and have excess energy reserves built up, then you don't need to gain any body fat to gain muscle. But in any other circumstance, the idea that you can stay very lean and pack on significant muscle and strength is just unrealistic. People using steroids create an anabolic growth environment in the body through chemicals. When you are drug-free, you can only create this anabolic growth environment through overfeeding. Extra food creates an anabolic effect in the body in the same way that steroids do. When fat people overfeed, they gain muscle. Someone who doesn't work out, who is fat and 300 pounds, might have more muscle than you or me from years of weight training. Why? Because food is anabolic. These people gain more fat than muscle. That's why they don't look muscular. But they still gain muscle without weight training. They oftentimes have a much bigger muscle base under that fat than people who've been weight training for years. Now, this is obviously not the path that I'm proposing, but the point holds true. Staying very lean doesn't put you in the anabolic environment required to gain muscle. You won't gain any weight and you won't gain any strength as a result. Do not stop bulking when you see a little bit of fat gain. Accept it and embrace the power that it has to help you gain muscle and strength. strength. You'll be able to train harder and recover better, which will lead to better and faster progress. Be willing to gain a pound or so of fat with every 2 to 3 pounds of muscle. The more advanced you become, the tighter this ratio becomes. As an advanced lifter, you should be happy with a 1-to-1 ratio of fat to muscle gain on a bulk. Now that you know the importance of gaining weight and accepting a little bit of body fat along with the muscle you gain, let's talk about how to bulk properly. This all sounds very easy, but without the right bulking strategy in place, you will be leaving significant progress on the table. And this is where most guys go wrong. People associate bulking with getting fat, but what bulking really is gaining weight in order to gain muscle. There are two traditional paths that people take when trying to gain muscle and strength. The first route is bear mode, which is pretty much what I rebounded to after having starved myself for so long. Bear mode is where you stuff yourself and eat anything you want whenever you feel like it. This results in a lot of fat gain. Sure, you will gain a lot of muscle following this approach, but most of what you gain will be body fat. While some fat gain is necessary, you don't need to put on this much. This is terrible for your health and your body composition. You'll have to spend tremendous periods of time cutting, which sucks. And as a result, you'll burn off most of the extra muscle you gained by bulking so hard. Unless you don't care about the way your physique looks, there's no benefit to this approach. The other extreme where I started is the lean gains approach. Lean gains are the idea that you can stay very lean and pack on tons of muscle mass without gaining any fat. Some people, including my younger self, are terrified of putting on an ounce of body fat. They eat in a very small calorie surplus, which in reality is not a calorie surplus. The idea behind the lean gains approach is that you'll eat at the exact calorie surplus that will allow you to maximize muscle growth without gaining any body fat. But unfortunately, this is not how it works. The problem with eating at your maintenance calorie level or in a tiny calorie surplus is that you can never really know for sure that you are actually eating in a calorie surplus. You're leaving no room for error and you have no assurance policy that you're actually eating enough. You'll have weeks or months where you'll end up in a net calorie deficit and actually lose muscle, or you'll just be in too tiny of a calorie surplus to make any appreciable gains. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video, then I'd recommend picking up my free 13-point drug-free muscle building checklist. So this is a free checklist that has the 13 fundamental principles of drug-free physique building that you literally cannot build muscle without. So I recommend taking a second, going into the description box and picking up this free checklist, and I'll send it over to you right away. So let's get back to the video. Lean gains are almost impossible for most drug-free people. The only two subsets of people who can make lean gains work are fat people and some novice lifters. People on steroids can also pull it off. They don't need food to create an anabolic environment. They have drugs to do that. For everyone else, it's almost impossible. The gains you'll make following the lean gains approach are painfully slow and negligible. It's so much faster and more practical to bulk and gain a little bit of body fat along with the muscle and then just trim it off afterwards. The best approach to take is somewhere in the middle. You don't want to eat too much to the point where you get fat and look worse than you did starting out, but you don't want to eat too little to the point where you're just going to spin your wheels and go nowhere. The perfect calorie surplus is roughly 300 calories above maintenance level. To calculate this perfect calorie surplus for you, you'll need to find your maintenance calorie intake. Start by taking your current body weight and multiplying it by 14 to 16. Use 14 if you're more sedentary and use 16 if you're more active. Then add 300 to this number. This is a good starting point, but you'll need to track your calories closely and monitor the scale to see if you're gaining the right amount of weight each month on this calorie intake. From that point on, you can adjust if need be. For some of you, it might not be enough. The idea is that you want to eat enough to gain roughly 2 pounds per month on the scale. If you're a beginner or early intermediate, you can gain 2 pounds of muscle every month if you're doing everything right. After this, it's diminishing returns, and after 3 years of proper training, it's more like half a pound of muscle every month. Another area where most guys go wrong is that they only do very short bulks. They bulk for 3 to 4 months of the year and then spend the rest of the time trying to stay lean. But this is not enough time to make considerable gains. You need to bulk for at least 6 months of the year, and I created this rule called the 9-3 rule. It could also be called the 8-4 rule or the 10-2 rule, depending on how long you need to bulk. The general idea behind this rule is that you need to bulk for the majority of the year before you've earned your right to a cutting phase. This rule ensures that you prioritize the muscle building process, because guess what? As a drug-free person, muscle building is a much longer process than fat loss. And I guarantee you the physique that you want has a lot more muscle mass than you realize. Most people simply do not have enough muscle mass on their frame to look good when they are lean. If you want to be 160 pounds with abs and have a swimmer's physique, physique, then don't worry about this. But if you want to stand out from the pack and get close to your potential, you have to spend more time bulking. And if you don't want to get close to your physique potential, you'll still want to gain the muscle that you want to gain as fast as possible. In which case, this applies to you too. Spending too much time focusing on staying lean, especially at the beginning, will prolong the time it will take you to get to where you want to be. If you're a novice lifter, spend the first 2 years on a consistent bulk and then get on the cyclical process of bulking and cutting. You need to focus on building your base and maximizing your noob gains as fast as you can. So many guys worry about their abs right away and focus on the details, but they have no substance on their physiques yet. Remember that you can't chisel a pebble. Can't sculpt your physique if you have nothing to sculpt, because symmetrical and proportionate skin and bones don't look very impressive. Here's the reality, guys. So what if you gain a little bit of body fat? Fat loss is such a fast process. I wish I had realized this back then when I refused to put on any body fat during my bulking phases. If you do things right and avoid excessive fat gain, you can trim off any of the excess fat you gained during your bulk within 2 to 3 months of cutting. If you go overboard, on the other hand, it will take you much longer to lose the fat. But if you follow a good nutrition plan and eat in the right calorie surplus, you won't gain much body fat. You'll gain the right amount to help you gain significant muscle and strength, but you will not become fat. You will stay within striking distance of your goal leanness. You should only ever have to do one significant fat loss phase if you start your journey overweight. After that, it's important that you stay within a body fat range that doesn't require you to cut for more than 2 to 3 months of the year. Muscle building is already a long process for drug-free people, far longer than losing fat. Don't make it even longer by refusing to put on some weight and body fat. You can trim it off really fast, but you can only gain muscle so fast. Do not shortchange yourself. If you're focusing on gaining muscle and strength, the fat you gain won't even be noticeable anyways.